Well, thank you, Maria, for that wonderful introduction. Is this me? Well, lovely to be here and see you all. I feel it's a great honour to be here, invited to talk at your Centennial. So thank you for that. It's also in a tiny way special for me insofar as this is the first sort of talk like this I've given since COVID.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I've been doing stuff on Zoom, but basically I don't like Zoom. I don't like being on Zoom and talking on Zoom. It's not my thing. But I've given, little talks in my community, but this is the first time out here in a hall with an audience, so. Great, well. So, as Maria said, chosen the theme of waking up in time, and so the subtitle is finding inner peace in these changeful times. And finding inner peace is basically what it's about, always. If you look at your life, in some way or other, whatever you're doing because ultimately you want to feel better, you want to feel more peace. We don't want to suffer, we don't want to be upset. We want to be happy, we want to be at peace, we want to be content. It's our fundamental motivation. And in these times, there seems to be more and more two things. There's more and more to stop us being at peace, so many things to be concerned about, worry about. And on the other hand, there's more and more spiritual teachers, ways to allow ourselves to be more at peace. So it's like these two things are coming together. So there's both the stress of these times and the challenges we're facing and the opportunity to wake up like there's never been such an opportunity before. And it's been there all along. The teachings have been there millennia in one way or another. But somehow, and I talk, in terms of my own life, I started getting into this back in the 60s, and there was hardly anything. I mean, back in Cambridge in those days, there was the local Cambridge bookstore, which was the second largest bookstore in England, and a university bookstore, and it had, a section on religion and things, and then up in one corner was one shelf, and it had, books of Krishnamurti and other odd teachers. Not he was an odd teacher, what I mean. Other teachers. That was it. The sort of the other religion. I mean, there would be books on Islam and that sort of stuff, the technical books. But in terms of other teachers, there were very, very few. And I started reading them. I started listening to a few teachers, doing my own work, started meditating. And now, you go into any small town, I'm sure in Ohio, you find bookstores just devoted to this area, with thousands of books on the subject, not only thousands of books and recordings, videos, DVDs, music related to it. Go online, and you can pick one of, I don't know how many teachers to go and listen to their lectures online, on YouTube, whatever. It's just exploded. And part of the reason for this is what I call positive feedback, which is behind any acceleration, which is the more people, like I write books, other people read those books, that supports them in some way. I read other people's books, I go to talks, that inspires me to do something, or write something, or think something. We're all like waking each other up in little ways. And when you're doing that, when everybody's doing their little bit to wake each other up, then you get this huge acceleration that's happened. And now we're living in a world where, these sort of issues make the front cover of Time. Excuse me. So we're living in this extraordinary time. There's never been so much opportunity to wake up, so much wisdom towards it. And extraordinary times in terms of the dangers facing us. And in the book, in Waking Up in Time, there's sort of three themes there. There's one is, what is waking up? How do we find inner peace? That. The second is really the crisis we're facing. I mean, I call it a crisis of consciousness. When you look around the world, all the things are going wrong, whether it's socially, environmentally, whatever, in almost every area, even in our personal lives. There's a lot we can see that's actually going wrong out there, but there's also, what is it in our consciousness that has led us to do these things which turn out to be not for our own overall good, not for the planet's overall good, not for the society's overall good? Why do we do all these things that end up creating more and more problems? And it's clearly, part of it is in our consciousness, which most of what goes wrong comes from short-sighted thinking, greed, love of power, general materialistic consciousness. This is behind so much of what's going wrong. And we don't look at that. You know, we say, okay, the Amazon rainforest is disappearing fast, so we need to do things, we need to stop deforestation, we need to pay the farmers in a different way, we need to do all these things, but nobody's asking, what is it in our consciousness that leads us to start behaving in these destructive ways? And I think it's a bit like, you know, if you go along to a doctor because you've got a stomachache, the doctor may give you something to remove the pain. But a good doctor, you want a doctor who's going to say, okay, let's do tests, let's see what's behind it. Maybe it's just stress, maybe it's something you've eaten, maybe it's something else. We need to see what's behind it, what's the root cause. And in our world, we don't look to the root cause as human consciousness. We look for the causes out there and tend to those, which is great. We need to do all that, but we also need to look at what is the root cause in our own consciousness. How do we get stuck in this limited mode of seeing things? How does the ego come to the fore so much? These sorts of questions. Why do we get stuck in certain beliefs about the things to do? So those are some of the fundamental questions which we're beginning to look at and answer through this whole spiritual regeneration that's happening in the world. And the other part of the book, part of the underlying theme, is just the accelerating rate of change. How things are moving faster and faster and faster and faster. How that's been going on for thousands of years. But now it's reached a stage where we're seeing it in our own lives. Things are going much faster now than they seem to be going 20 years ago or 50 years ago. Speeding up, and of course now with artificial intelligence and things like that, things are going faster and faster and faster and faster. And that also plays a role in what happens in the world. Just can we adapt to more and more change when it's coming faster and faster? So those are sort of the three themes in the book, which I'll touch upon to varying extents here. So I want to start with, what is waking up? What do we mean by waking up? It's a term that's used a lot. For me, there's two ways of looking at it. What are we waking up to? I think the basic bottom line is we're waking up to our true nature, our true self, to what we really are. As if we're waking up from the dream we live in of what the world is about. I'm not saying, this is a dream. To me, this stuff is very, very real. It's very real. I'm not saying we're dreaming this, but we are dreaming what it's all about, what's going on, what do I want, what's important, all this stuff. And we get lost in this dream of our interpretations of the world, our view of it, our belief systems. And all of that takes us out into the past, into the future. We end up thinking about all this stuff, which is actually veiling our true nature. All the time we're out there thinking about what needs to happen, what do I need to do. We're not really aware of who we really are, what our true nature is. And one of the fundamental qualities of our true nature, I call it natural mind. It's the mind that's not disturbed by anything. Natural mind. Doesn't mean any exotic, wonderful, out of this world, blissful state. It's just what happens when we stop thinking? What happens when we stop worrying about things? And it's just a state of okayness, really. Because when there's a sort of feedback loop, when everything is okay in our world, personally, everything is okay, we're fed, we're not in pain, there's no big disturbance we have to handle. When everything's okay in our world, we feel okay inside. It's that natural sort of reflection. Things are okay, I feel okay. If things aren't okay, if I'm starving, hungry, I feel that. I feel distress, I feel pain. I want to do something about it to come back to feeling okay. And that's part of the reason, as I said, the reason we do anything. Ultimately, when you analyze it, why do you do this? Why is that important? You get back down to it. It's so that I feel better, so that I feel happier, so that I feel more content. So our natural state of mind is one of contentment. That's what we're looking for, is one of contentment. And so part of our journey through life is finding ways to come back to contentment. How do we come back to contentment? And some of that is dealing with things in the world which are disturbing us. But probably the most important parts of that are coming back to our mind and how we make ourselves discontent. Because we fall into this mindset, this belief system in our culture. And I say our culture, probably more or less every single culture. Not, maybe not some of the indigenous peoples, but in most quote civilized cultures, there's a mindset that says, if you're not happy, do something about it. Get something. Change something. There's something in the world that needs changing. And that's sort of indoctrinated into us, from our parents, because they're caught in it. We learn that our education system reinforces that. This is how you do things in the world. This is how you change things so that you can be happy. The media. Name me 6 movies that aren't based on this, one way or another, subtly. Advertising. God. Just about every single advertisement you see is saying, there's something missing in your life, you can't be happy as you are, but buy this product, credit card, vacation, whatever it is, change your bank, and you will feel better. They know it, they know that's what we're looking for. And what all the great spiritual teachings say in one way or another is, that's all wrong. That's all wrong. Because basically, that leads to a lot of thinking about things, how to do things. It keeps us caught in this dream about the world. It keeps us caught. And they say, what we miss is the fact that the contentment is there. Our natural state is one of contentment. But all the time we're out there looking for what's going to make us happy, in the future, we stop ourselves being happy in the present. And I sometimes say this is sort of the sad joke about human beings. We so much want to be at peace, content in the future. We're thinking about that, what can I do, what can I get, how can I be at peace in the future? We deprive ourselves of being at peace in the present moment. Crazy. And what they're all saying one way or another is, what we need to do is step back from that thinking mind, the worrying mind, the planning mind. It's useful at times. It's very useful at times to be thinking about what to do, plan, all that stuff. But we don't need to be caught in it the whole time. And that's why most traditions have some form of meditation or spiritual practice, which is about not thinking, allowing the mind to become quiet, stepping back from that normal thinking, so that we can begin to touch into our natural mind, this natural state. And when we do, several things. One, it feels good. It actually feels good to be quiet, or even to be thinking less. I mean, those of you who meditate, you probably resonate with this experience. I sit down to meditate, and I had a busy day doing this, and I'm thinking this, sit down to meditate and let those thoughts go, and there's this feeling of, wow, I was caught up in that state. There's a sense of relief and ease that comes just as you begin to let the mind settle down. It's like, and it feels good. It's what we're looking for. I remember, I don't know how many of you are familiar with A Course in Miracles. It was something that was very important in my own life as a teaching. But one of the lines from A Course in Miracles says, the journey to inner peace is a journey without distance to a goal that's never changed. And it's a journey without distance because it's right here. We don't need to do anything or get anything to be at peace. We just need to stop doing all the things that cover up that natural peace of mind. And the goal has never changed. It's always how do we come back to being in ourselves, feeling at ease, to feeling content. So, what happens because we get caught in this belief system? We get caught in a lot of, our thinking. It creates fatigue, mental fatigue. But it stops us being in the present moment. Because our thinking is always taking us out of the present moment. So, so many teachings would say it's about, as Ram Dass would say, be here now. It's about being here now, here in the present moment. And our thoughts that continually take us this way, that way, they don't bring us back to the present moment, they take us out of the present moment. So that again is a universal teaching. How do we come back and just notice how the present moment is, in this moment, without any thoughts about it. This, right now, this present moment. It's always there. As soon as we come back to the present moment, I find it's a sense of, this feels good. So it stops us being at peace, it stops us being in the present moment. It also stops, probably the other thing that all the great spiritual traditions talk about, love. Love. Our thinking, so often, when it's thinking about other people, so easily we can get into judgments about other people. Something that upset us, or positive judgments. That person is wonderful because they did this, or whatever it is. We get caught up in judgment in one way or another. Whereas, to me, there's different ways in which we use the word love. But I think one of the fundamental ways is actually being compassionate for how the other person is. One of the practices I started doing recently, which is just to think of somebody, and you can do it, I won't do it now, just to take this home and try it, just to think of somebody you know. Usually it's best to start with somebody in your family, someone you know pretty well. And just, think, well, here they are. They've had their own journey, their own background, their own socialization, parents, whatever, their life story, they've been through this, been through that. And just say, here they are. Just to have that compassion for who they are and how they've got to this point in their life. And also to do it for oneself. I mean, again, another technique I've been finding so powerful just very recently is just to put my hand on my heart and just say, oh, honey. Oh, honey. And as soon as I do that, it's like my inner critic just goes out the window. My inner critic says, oh God, you're so bad, you do this, and you're always saying this, you're doing that, and you're self-centered, blah, blah, blah. You say, oh honey, yeah, here you are, you've been on this journey, here you are now, and it's okay, stop all that criticizing. That's sort of like, that's self-compassion. That to me is real loving yourself. I mean, there's lots of other ways we can love ourselves, but just to say, it's like, oh honey, here I am for you. It's like, all okay, don't worry, don't fret. Yeah, you've had a hard time at times, and you've got this that you want to do, but that. And then to do it for other people, even people who don't know so well, can be really, really good just to imagine what they might have been through in their life, although we don't know. To know that everybody has been on their own journey and come to the place they are now. And to me, that's the essence of forgiveness, that compassion. The way we often think of forgiveness, just on a very superficial level, is like, okay, I know you did wrong, but I'm not going to punish you this time. I'll forgive you. I'll forgive you, I won't punish you. You know, we'll pretend it didn't happen, whatever. Real forgiveness is not that at all. I mean, it's interesting, the word for forgiveness is translated from the Greek in the Bible into forgiveness. The Greek word is aphesis, which actually means to let go, to release the grip you have on something. And so forgiveness of other people is releasing the grip our mind has on them, all the judgments we hold about them, letting it go, just releasing the grip our mind has. And again, when we do that, the value of that is not for the other person. You may be forgiving somebody for something, you know, they may not even know you, that you have some judgment, you let it go. The value of forgiveness like that is how we feel. When we let go of the judgment, we feel better, we feel more at ease. Because when we're judging somebody or getting angry at something or whatever it is, we're making ourselves upset. You know how, in one way, feeling angry about somebody is good. It's justified, yes, they were some stupid, whatever it was. We feel good because we're better. But we're actually, you know, getting ourselves tense and uptight because we're angry, because, you know, underneath, anger is like, I want to hit you. When we just let go of that forgiveness, it's like, you know, it's just all of this is just coming back to how can we feel more at peace, more at ease in ourselves, because that's ultimately what it's all about, is coming back to that. I was going to say something about that. There's something else on forgiveness I wanted to talk about. No, it'll come back. It's there, what was it? Anyway, it will come back, or it won't come back. It'll probably come back when I'm driving away from it. Oh, yeah, oh honey. Got it. Came much quicker than I expected. Letting go. I'll talk about letting go of judgments. Again, letting go is, again, a universal teaching. And in fact, my last but one recent book, which is out there, is called Letting Go of Nothing. It's a sort of Zen title. But there's a reason for that. People say, well, letting go of nothing, there's nothing to let go of. It's really, there's no thing to let go of. What we're letting go of is the judgments, the mindsets, the way we're letting go of the way we see things. And the way we see things is not actually a thing in itself. The analogy I sometimes draw is, you know, if you're wearing blue spectacles, you see the world as blue, and you see everything as blue. You don't see the spectacles. That's what you're seeing the world through, is the blue lens. But that's not the spectacles aren't a thing in the world. In the same way, our mindsets, our judgments are not another thing out there to let go of. It's the way we are seeing things, the way we are perceiving things, the beliefs we have about them. So they aren't actually things. So it's really, the essence of letting go is a shift in perception, a shift in how we interpret things. And give you one simple example. Recently, a couple of years ago, I had boxes and boxes and boxes of books in storage in a container in Scotland, and they'd been there for 10 years. And I could probably name 1 or 2 books that were there, and other stuff that was there. And I had to move the books somewhere else. And it's like, okay, what do I do? What do I do? There's other storage facilities, etc. When am I next going to be in Scotland to do all this? And I thought it was so important, you know, my books, they're so important, you know. Things I read that were really useful. And then as I dug into it, the belief system behind it all was that one day, maybe, they might be useful. And the primary way in which they would be useful is I would move back to England and have this lovely country cottage. I would have them all up on my bookshelves. Let them all go. But it wasn't about letting the books go. It was about letting my mindset go that I need to hold on to them because that will be useful at some time in the future. That's what I was letting go of, the mindset. And letting go is something I've explored a lot because it's such a common theme in nearly all traditions. I say aphesis, forgiveness, actually means to let go of one's grip. And you know, people try to let go, they say letting go is hard. I think there should be a song called Letting Go is Hard to Do. Because we think of letting go as getting rid of some experience. Say you've got some, I keep coming back to anger, but it's a common thing for people. Something will upset. We think I've got to let go of that anger means I've got to get rid of it. I mustn't feel it anymore. Or we just push it to the out. We think something different. We push it to the outside of our consciousness. It's still there, but it's not bothering us. That's what we think letting go is. It's not having something bother us. You know, I've got to let go of my financial worries. The financial situation is still there. You're not going to change that. So you push the worries away. I realized 2 things. Firstly, to take the exact opposite approach. When there's something you want to let go of, to let it in. To let it into your awareness, whatever it is. If it's, you know, some upset, let it in. How does it actually feel in your body? Where's your body tense? What's going on? Because any emotion is an impulse to act in some way or another. In fact, the Latin emotion is ex motare, which means to act out, to move out, to literally move out into the world. So any emotion has an element of doing something, whether it's wanting to hit somebody, or if you're depressed, the emotion is wanting to retire, to go into a cave. You know, if you're feeling shame, you want to hide. If you're feeling greedy, you want to go and grab something. Behind any emotion, there's something going on in the body. It's like, it doesn't show up, but the mind, there's a thought system which says, this is what I need, this is what I don't need, whatever it is. And that thought system triggers the body to think, to start having the first impulse to act. And usually it doesn't show at all, but it's there. And so the first thing in terms of, I say, letting go emotion is, first of all, let it in. Let it in. Both let in what is actually happening in the body. It's like, okay, that's happening. And sometimes just sitting with it. I mean, I had an example several months ago where I was just feeling niggled about somebody. It's just like, just feeling uncomfortable about something that had gone on in our relationship. And I didn't know what it was, and I was sort of almost ignoring it. It's not that important. But it's still in the back of my mind, wondering what it was. And so I just sat down and sort of tuned into what was going on in my body. And what came up, totally by surprise, is the way he's acting actually reminds me of the way my father would act sometimes. And I would never have guessed that, because I was looking at him today, in the present day. I never have guessed that's what was behind it, but by sitting and feeling what's going on in the body, it just, that wisdom, unconsciously we have the wisdom, we know what's going on. That wisdom just came up and said, remember your father used to be a bit like that? So another reason to just let things in. With anything like this. So the first stage of letting go is to do the opposite, not to try and get rid of it, but to actually let the experience in. Whatever it is, let the experience in. Often we have a fear, or if I really let this in, I'm feeling sad. If I really let this sadness in, I'm going to start bursting into tears in public. Could do, but when you let the feeling in, it's like, there's something here, and we get to notice what sadness feels like and what's going on. And in most cases, things don't get worse when you let them in. That's the fear. Or things will really burst out. My anger will go out, hit the button. It doesn't happen that way. When you let it in, it's like, there's a familiarity with what you're feeling. And having let it in, let it be. Let it be. Don't try to change it. Just let it be. So, I'm feeling, that's what I was doing with this situation with this friend. I just noticed it, I just let it be, and in the letting it be, the wisdom came through what it was about. So even when you let it in, allow it to be there as it is, not trying to change it. That I feel is a really important bit. So I reframe letting go as let in and let be. And I just find it, again and again, it's a principle I come back to, which is just really, really helpful in things.
Do you think the Beatles had that in mind when they made the song?
Yes. Yep. Yep. I mean, I'm not the first person to say let it be. Again, you'll find it in many teachings, particularly, in psychotherapy and things, will say just let it be. No, I'm sure. I mean, when I think it was Paul wrote the song, Let It Be, basically when I'm in trouble, Mother Mary comes to me with words of wisdom, let it be. Don't get upset about it. Because if you start getting upset and getting all those mental turmoil and stuff going on, you're just getting upset. You're not coming back to being at peace. It's like all these different ways we take ourselves out of that journey back to being at peace. So, let's talk a bit more about another side of our true nature, which, again, is something which is in so many traditions, our true self. What do we mean by our true self? And there's a question that's often asked, as an exercise. The question is, who am I? Do this exercise, who am I? And people will sit in couples and ask the question. And the way that exercise usually goes, if you ask me, who am I? First thing I'd probably say is Peter Russell. It's interesting. if you ask somebody who they are, generally, the first thing they'll say is their name. Names can change. But the name, if you think about it, is one of the earliest identities in life. You know, as a very young infant, we start learning our name. We start learning who we are as a name, as an identifier. We identify with our name. And then with, you know, other stuff, being male, British, writer, and then my values. There's a whole range of stuff. With these exercises, you go on and on and on and on, thinking of all the things that you identify with. The real purpose of the question is, who is the you that is identifying with all these things? And so the better way of asking the question not is, who are you, but what are you? Or an even deeper way of asking it is, what does the word I actually refer to? You know, when I say I am Peter Russell, what does the word I there actually point to? What does it refer to? And this is what is there, you know, it's talked about as the pure self, the true self. What is that true self? And we get caught up because we start looking for something. The philosopher David Hume, 200 years ago, did this exercise where he sat down to discover his true self. And he just went into meditation and looked around. There was nothing. He couldn't find anything. He could find lots of thoughts, lots of feelings, you know, egocentric behaviors. But there was no self. There was no sort of entity called the self. And that's what I think anybody finds when you really look into it. The purpose of the question is not to find something which you are. I am this. That can't be you. It's what is the I? What do we mean by I? And what we're generally meaning, when you get down to what it is you mean when we use the word I, it's a sense of beingness. It's that same sense of beingness that has been there all your life. 10 years ago, I was different in many ways, but that sense of me-ness that was there goes back, you know, when I was as far back as I can remember in my childhood. That sense of beingness is the same. It's like, and what it really is being conscious. It's like, I am, you could say, I am consciousness. And I'm saying that carefully because I'll explain why. But that's what we're really saying, is what I am is this conscious being observing all this, getting caught up in all these thoughts, whatever it is, being at peace, that I am this conscious being. And you know, part of the meditation, when the mind falls quiet, it's just like, here I am. Here I am. I am that which is experiencing this moment right now. In fact, it's a question I sometimes use for myself is, who or rather, what is it that is experiencing this moment right now? As a pointer. And there's no answer to this question as a thing, as anything else. There's no answer to it. The answer is experience. Here I am. We know what it means, that sense of being. We know what it means to be conscious. We all know that. In a sense, that is the universal truth of all of us, is we are all conscious beings, and we all know what it's like to be conscious. What we're conscious of, our personalities, our thoughts, all of that is different for each of us. We have different backgrounds, different experiences, all of that. What takes place in consciousness is so varied, but the underlying essence is always the same, never changes, and I would posit is the same for everybody. So what it is for me, you know, when I meditate and the mind goes quiet, and like, here I am, just being without any labels, without any description, without any of that stuff going on, must be very much like what it is for you to be in that state, where there's nothing going on, nothing we can identify with. I mean, I sometimes think, you know, what is silence? You know, when this room falls silence, is that quality of silence any different from when that room falls silent? You know, the silence is the same with that sense of stillness in the mind. It must be the same for each of us. So deep down, that level of being, that self, our true nature, is something we all share. It's something common to us all, that we each, I say share, we each know the same thing. We each share that experience, deep down. And there is, okay, one thing that leads to is when we realize deep down we're all the same, and deep down we all want the same thing. Deep down we all want that, whatever you want to call it, peace of mind, contentment, whatever, happiness. We all want something of that nature. That's what we're wanting in life. So we all want the same thing ultimately. And we're all ultimately that same sense of beingness. But what can happen in any relationship, you know, personal, family, work relationships, strangers, we so easily fall into what I call a vicious circle of attack. So, you know, one of you says something to me which is completely harmless, no attack in it, but because, you know, I have my stuff, I misinterpret that as some criticism or judgment or they're getting at me. They're not at all, but I misinterpret it. I feel attacked. And again, if I'm not fully present, my spontaneous reaction is often to attack back. Well, you would say that, wouldn't you? Or what do you know? Or it may just be body language, like, huh? Or very subtle, just silence, whatever. Or it may, you know, whatever. But in some subtle way now, I am trying to hurt you. Even just a little tiny bit, but I'm trying to hurt you. And now you actually do feel attacked, because I've deliberately tried to attack you. And if you're not fully 100% conscious in the moment and enlightened, you do the same. Well, you know, you can say that, but... And so we end up in this game, which the rules of the game are, I'm not feeling loved enough. You're not... What we all want is to feel loved, we want to be respected, we don't want to be attacked, we don't want to be judged. We want other people just, that sort of loving us, that respect, to feel okay. You are not loving me enough. So I am going to withdraw a bit of my love and dig the knife in a little bit deeper so that you will realize the error of your ways and love me better. Recognize it? When two people do that with each other, you just spiral down. And it can all be very nice on the surface and everything, but deep down there's these little things getting at each other, which is the opposite to love. This is another form of love, it's the opposite to love. It's not caring for another person's inner well-being. You know, we're fairly good about caring for people on the outside, but not so good at caring for a person's how they feel, what's going on. And so the way out of this is actually really simple and quite easy to practice. Is just to commit to yourself. And it's good to just start off just doing this with family or partner, someone you're close to. Just to commit to saying, you know, in any communication, in whatever I want to share now, or any interaction, how can I do this so that the other person feels good upon receiving it? Not they feel attacked or hurt. How can I do this deliberately and removing the attack and saying, how can I do this so the other person feels good on receiving it? And that was one of Buddha's definitions of right speech. Right speech, one of his definitions was, how can I say this so that the other person feels good and feels loved upon receiving it? And that is really the golden rule of every single spiritual tradition. Do as you would be done by. Treat others as you would like to be treated. And it's what I call the principle of kindness, of being kind to each other. And because I'm always going back to the roots of words, kindness comes from kin. We're all of the same kin. We're all of the same kin. So kindness is recognizing we're all of the same kin, that we all basically are the same deep inside, and we all want the same. We're all of the same kin in that spiritual sense. And that to me is where kindness comes from. So, something else. I could talk for hours. Part of this is like, because I haven't spoken for so long. I was thinking, what I want to say. So you're getting a sort of download. This is coming back to the idea of true nature, the true self. Most of you, I expect, have heard the phrase Sat-Chit-Ananda from Indian teachings. And that's where it comes from originally, is that statement, what is I? What is I? What is the true self? And the answer is the true self is Sat-Chit-Ananda. And just to unpack it, I find it just full of such wisdom. Sat is actually a part of the verb to be. So it literally means what is. Sat is what is. And it also gets translated as what is unchanging, what is eternal, because what is doesn't change. So it's often translated as eternal, ever-present, truth. But actually the root meaning is what is. And what is chit. And chit means being conscious. What is and what never changes, which is always there, is being conscious. That's chit. Ananda is an interesting word. It's translated so much in the West as bliss. And I think what happened was, a couple of 100 years ago, when people were discovering the East and Eastern religions, it was all very different. And these scholars would go out, they were like, wow, they wanted to learn Pali or wanted to learn Sanskrit, these languages which are so totally different, although in a way they underlie our own language. They wanted to understand these languages and these spiritual teachings which are so different. All they knew was monotheistic traditions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and here were totally different religions. And the language, and so they were fascinated by it and learning. And some of the books that were written then in the 19th century, deep, deep texts on Eastern philosophy and religion. And when they came across the word Ananda, so the people were describing in their language what it meant. And this is my guess. People started saying, oh, yes, we know that. It's bliss, what we call bliss. And the current sort of connotation of bliss is like some amazing, ecstatic, orgiastic experience. Like, wow, I'm totally taken out of myself. That sort of thing. That's a sort of superficial thing. When people say, oh, bliss, if I meditate enough, I will find bliss. I will be in bliss. The root meaning of Ananda is fascinating. The A at the beginning means great. It's a long A means great. A short A in Sanskrit means not, as in Advaita and all those other words that begin with A, it means not. The long A means great. Nanda means contentment. So the root meaning of Ananda is great contentment. And that to me is a far more meaningful term for what experiences when things just drop away and you're back in that finding inner peace. Is a state of great contentment because there's nothing else you want there. You know, changing jobs isn't important when you're sitting there in that state of quiet. It's like nothing needs to be added. That's why it's sometimes called the great perfection. Perfection means everything necessary has been done. The great perfection is nothing needs to be added. How could you add anything to great contentment? You know, all you could add is some more money. So that I just mentioned because it's like it comes back to how this is just so universal here in what we're talking about. I think maybe I'll pause there. It's 3 o'clock. I was going to talk for half the time, which I've now done. And so we will have a break of 15 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions and answers, which I always find are the best bit of doing this. That's when, you know, we get to explore other things and things more deeply. So, Mike is coming down.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's working.
Well, thanks for coming, first of all. This is really great. And also thank you, what you posit about the exponential nature of time versus linear time. Very enlightening for me. In the book, you draw somewhat of a parallel between the stages of development for a human, or any creature really, and then the stages of development of consciousness itself, or awareness. And I noted, however, that the parallel kind of stops at the middle age or flourishing stage, and then you start to talk about this place we're going, this singularity potential. Right? And I wonder if you think about, or if it's worth thinking about, that as an corollary to the potential that there is this collective awakening, this singularity, as it were, that's made possible through the human organism being able to, for awareness to see itself. But that now with the dawn of AI, there is an opportunity to free awareness or consciousness from material confines entirely. And maybe we're just a stop along the way, and the human piece of the freedom of consciousness is not our freedom, right? But it's freedom of consciousness itself. And then maybe we're not part of that next piece as it, and the potential for AI to make that come.
Wonderful. We're going to extend this session for another hour. No, great. So much in there. And the book he's talking about is my new book called Forgiving Humanity, right? Yeah. Which is really the sequel to Waking Up in Time. It's bits I didn't write about Waking Up in Time, which I wish I had, and now I've done it. And just a bit of background on the acceleration. As I say in Waking Up in Time, the evolution has been accelerating from day one. It took billions of years for simple cells to evolve, and then multicellular organisms evolve much faster because each stage makes it easier for the next stage. And then when you get to mammals and nervous systems, mammals are just a pretty recent addition to the planet, and they evolve much faster. And say, the great apes, we've just been around 10 million years or so. Everything's evolving faster because each stage makes it easier for the next stage. It's a positive feedback loop which happens in evolution. And in the book, I follow that through humanity's history and seeing the major thing, the major accelerator was language. Human language, verbal language, speech. I mean, most animals have some form of language. Language itself is not new, but with speech, we can take ideas, we can form concepts, we can make generalizations, we can share our experiences with each other, share what we think. Speech changed everything. It meant we could learn from each other. This is a better way to chip a flute, whatever it is. Or I found if you go over that way, you can hunt animals better over, whatever it is. Language was the great accelerator. And it allowed us to design better tools. It allowed us to collect together knowledge. In fact, it gave birth to technologies. We can understand how to do things. So language started this great acceleration that humanity's been on from whenever language began, who knows, a million years ago, 500,000. And each new innovation made it easier for the next innovation, spurred things on. And so you can see that through the whole history of humanity. I mean, agriculture, when agriculture came along, that meant we could begin to share our labour, we could feed each other better, feed ourselves better. Then came civilization, we didn't need everybody to work on the land, we could have civilization. Then came the Industrial Revolution, which meant we could mass produce things, manipulate the world better. All of it just increased the speed of change. And then computers came along, 50, 60 years ago, in the World Wide Web 30 years ago. All of this was sharing information, which promoted technology. And now, as I said, things are going so fast. I mean, how many people probably have to update their software every year? Every 6 months? I mean, buy a new computer because the old one's out of date 3 years later. Just have a new phone. Got to get the latest phone. The things are speeding up in this way and will keep speeding up. And this is the point. However fast things are going now, the future is going to be even faster. It's one thing we just got to get used to. This is pretty intense, but where it's going to be faster and faster and faster. What language did, it basically, one way of looking at it is language outsourced memory. Before then, we remembered, as individuals, remembered our experience, but when you could share your experiences with each other, we started learning, we had collective memory. So the advent of language basically outsourced memory. We didn't have to remember everything in our lives ourselves. And it became stories, and then when writing came along, we didn't have to remember the stories. AI, particularly the large language models which people know through Chat-GPT, and also the other things like a lot of the artificial intelligence apps which are changing science. I mean, there's so much going on there. The benefits to science of artificial intelligence are phenomenal. I mean, just one example of many. Protein folding. We can work out the chemical structure of a protein. It's a list of like 200 letters. How does that fold up is absolutely critical for designing drugs, for knowing how the body works, how certain proteins will work with other proteins, amino acids. It usually takes a team of 10 people, several years to work out a protein. They gave it to AlphaFold, one of the Google AIs. Came back with 2 million possible protein foldings. Not possible, 2 million foldings for 2 million different proteins. Think of what that's done in terms of saved us research. So there's lots of examples of that where AI is just going to speed things up much, much more. What it's going to do, it's going to outsource our problem solving. Because much of the time we're solving problems, but I mean, there's many other examples I can give you where it's doing this. It's solving the problems we have in science. So it's outsourcing problem solving. Where is that going to take us? One thing it's going to do is just initiate a second great acceleration. The acceleration's taken the last 500,000 years, whatever. On top of that, we've got a much, much faster acceleration coming. And that, to me, is one of the real significances of what's happening and where it's going. And that's not my thing. A friend of mine, Chris Fields, pointed this out. And when he said this to me, I just thought, wow, that's so important. Now, the question you're coming up with, pretty loosely, could AI become conscious? Yeah. Could AI take on the journey of consciousness? I don't know. My sense is not. And I'll tell you why. I think, just to go back a second, I was talking about being conscious, the one thing we all know. I think this faculty of being conscious is universal to all life. You know, everybody's got any pets, dogs, cats, horses, they're clearly conscious. You keep going down, there's nowhere you can draw a line. As soon as you draw a line somewhere, say between reptiles and fish, you have to explain if fish aren't conscious and reptiles are, what's the difference? Wherever you go back, you cannot draw a line. So we have to say there's some sense of interiority, subjectivity connected with life. With very simple organisms, it's not really manifest, but there's something there. So I believe that consciousness, being conscious and being alive are intimately connected. And it's the complexity of the organism that seems to relate, the information flow in the organism that relates to the degree to which consciousness is displayed. Now, AI, computers, are basically crystalline beings. The silicon chips is crystals. And there's no sense, well, crystals are far simpler than the bacteria, for a start. And so, people ask, is a rock conscious? I say, ultimately, if consciousness goes all the way down, but it doesn't mean a rock has experiences like we know them. It doesn't mean it has experiences like a bacterium knows them. It's like way, way down. So I would put, first of all, I put computers way down below bacteria in terms of the quality of consciousness, if there is any glimmer whatsoever. Secondly, if they developed some form of subjectivity, it would be nothing like what we know, nothing like ours. I mean, even our consciousness is like different from a dog's, which has much greater hearing, smell sensitivity, different from a bat, which uses radio, not ultrasonics, different from a snake, which senses heat, or a fish, which senses electricity. So already we don't know what other animals their consciousness is like, we just know there's that sense of being aware. So I don't think artificial intelligence will ever be conscious in the way that we know consciousness. And what happens is, and I see it happening a lot, is people start projecting consciousness onto artificial intelligence. I mean, all this talk about, well, maybe AI will decide it would be better without humanity. That's projecting a human psychology onto something which is totally non-human. It's saying an artificial intelligence will think like humans do, in the rubbishy, screwed up way that humans do. Maybe we'd be better off if we got rid of these human beings. I don't see that. I think there's great dangers in it, other great dangers, but I don't think it will become conscious in that sense, as we know it. It may say it is, it may well simulate consciousness, but I don't think it can. But I mean, just interesting, this thing about projecting. I use AI quite a bit in my research these days. I find it much better to go to AI rather than Google to ask questions. And I was asking a list recently of certain organisations interested in certain topics, just for research I wanted to do. And it came back with 10 items. And I said, okay, can you give me 10 more? 10 more. Can you give me 10 more? 10 more. Can you give me 10 more? 10 more. About the 7th time, I started thinking, does it mind me asking? Would it be upset if I asked it for 10 more? And I did it stupid. But that was my reaction, and it shocked me, because in some way I was projecting some human consciousness onto this very simple AI, just given a list of organizations. But what is going to happen as AI gets more and more sophisticated and more personal? I mean, now the fact you can just chat to ChatGPT and get questions back in voice, it's all going to become much more personal, and the connections have become much more personal. And I think we are going to be projecting consciousness onto AI everywhere, thinking it is conscious when it isn't. Anyway, that's my take on it. Yeah. Question here.
Thank you.
Microphone, please.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to see you live again. It's been a while. I've had the pleasure of following you around for a couple of decades. What provoked my question was, you were talking about that wonderful little graph that you did in the video in Global Brain about the exponential growth of agriculture, industry, at the era of information, and you ended by extrapolating the graph and talking about the involutionary journey overtaking everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to bring that back into.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. By the way, I'm enjoying your AI cloning chats. They're pretty good too. But I wanted to cap it with this question in parallel to that.
Yeah.
You know, you quoted Gregory Bateson about saying that we've reached the stage that we can no longer predict the consequences of our own intelligence. And I'm wondering about this exponential growth of consciousness and this issue with who's doing the learning.
That's a whole other question. Several things there, okay. So it's really building on the previous question. What I was showing, and again, that was my thinking back 40 years ago. 40 years, more than 40 years ago, I published The Global Brain. So I look back now and it's like, God, I was so naive. But yes, so those graphs, I was talking what we're talking about here, the rate of growth of agriculture was exponential to begin with, then flattens off. In the same way, you know, the rate of growth of industrialization was exponential, much steeper, and then it's flattened off. The rate of growth of computers was much steeper still and flattened off. And I was saying there's a rate of growth we don't look at, which is the rate of growth of consciousness. And that I was referring to really at the beginning of the talk, saying, you know, we don't see what's happened just in the last 50 years from being a real marginal subject to the awakening of consciousness being almost mainstream. And that is on its own exponential curve for the same reason of positive feedback. As I was saying, the more we learn, read books, study with each other, the more we have to give each other, the more we awaken, the faster we grow. And so I see there's three accelerating changes, three accelerating developments coming together right now. Well, I'll say right now, this time in history. The accelerating growth of science and technology, the exponential growth of science and technology, which is what we all see. Then there's the exponential growth of the breakdown of the system, you know, because, again, many things that we see becoming a problem environmentally, whatever, climate change, they have their roots in exponential growth, as well as in consciousness, human consciousness, but also in exponential growth. I mean, because we are consuming things far faster than the planet can cope, or putting out pollution far faster. The greenhouse, climate change, we have always been producing CO2. We're now producing it thousands and thousands of times faster than the planet can reabsorb it, because we're just, again, it's that exponential growth. So we have an exponential growth in the, if you like, the falling apart of society, the dangers, and we have an exponential growth in consciousness. We have these three trends happening together. How that's going to play out, we can, I have my own stories. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. But one way it's going to play out, I think is really important, is the more awake we are and the more secure we are in ourselves, the better we're going to be able to handle what's coming and the contributions we can make. And again, an analogy I often use is trees in a storm. If a tree is going to withstand a storm, first of all, it needs to be flexible. It needs to be needs to bend with the wind. I think we too, the more flexible we are in our thinking, the better. Just because we did it this way 20 years ago, that may not be the way to approach things today. So we need to be more creative, more flexible in our thinking so that we can actually not be stuck in the past. A tree needs to have strong roots so that it's not blown over. Strong roots for me is like being anchored in our own being. Coming back, this is who I am. And so when things change, we don't go into panic. It's like, okay, let me be settled, let me be anchored in my own being. And from that space, this is probably the most appropriate way for me to deal with things. And lastly, a tree needs to be in a forest. A tree on its own. I lived in a forest for many years, and some major storms, so the storms would happen at the treetops. Trees in the forest were hardly moved, you wouldn't know it, because they're there, they all break the wind for each other, they all soften the wind for each other. And so community, I think, is going to be really more and more important the times we move into. And community, some of the stuff we're talking about, caring for each other, helping each other, not being antagonistic, working together. So that's how I see it fitting. Yeah. Thanks. Yes, microphone, please. Coming this way, you're looking the wrong way.
You made reference during your talk about the wisdom tradition, so to speak, that you investigated and so on. My question is very simple. In the light of the evidence of all these traditions, when do you think science will stop treating consciousness as a hard problem?
Okay. Let me go back a step. Simple question, but you need to say what science means by the hard problem. And it comes back to the way we think about consciousness. I think the word consciousness is the wrong word, because it's a noun. When we add N-E-S-S to any word, we take an adjective, and if you look up in the dictionary, ness means the state or quality of. So, softness is the state or quality of being soft. Softness doesn't exist. Being soft is an experience that exists. And happiness isn't a thing that exists, but being happy is something we all know. The same with consciousness. It doesn't exist as such. We all know what it means to be conscious. And then we use the word consciousness as a general way of talking about this thing. It's a general noun. So that's the first thing that, in terms of the hard problem, science is looking at consciousness the wrong way. It's looking for something, some entity, something that comes out of the brain. And that to me is a huge mistake, because, as I've been saying, being conscious is just the awareness of this, awareness of that. you can't have consciousness become the object of experience when it's the subject of experience. And all what science is doing the whole time is making consciousness something to be studied, something to be explained. Instead of just a recognition, I am conscious. So, because of that mistake in science, most scientists are trying to explain how consciousness can possibly arise from the brain. And no one's come up with anything that is either not totally aware or doubtful. And David Chalmers, who coined the term the hard problem, he said the easy problem, and easy in quotes, the easy problem is understanding the brain in sufficient detail that when you solve a mathematical problem, or fall in love, or see a tree, we know what's happening in the brain. We understand all the neural correlates of your experience. And he calls it easy. He said maybe there's lots of rapid progress in neuroscience. Maybe in 100 years we might be in a position to answer that question. But what they then do is they confound being conscious with the experience that arises in consciousness. So I personally am quite happy to accept that everything I experience comes from neural activity. Whatever I'm experiencing, there's something going on in the brain which correlates with my experience. That doesn't mean that the brain creates being conscious. It means the brain populates consciousness, like it populates it with all our experiences. But they mistake it because it creates the experiences that must be creating consciousness. I don't think it is. It's, they say, an intrinsic part of life. So he said the hard problem is when we've worked out all the easy problems, the hard problem still remains of why are we conscious in the first place? They're two different questions. Why are we conscious in the first place? That's the hard problem. And he starts saying science will never solve that. And where he and a number of philosophers, a growing number of philosophers in this area, and neuroscientists and people who are thinking about consciousness, if you're at the leading edge of that thought, and just small, but it's the leading edge, you can see people coming out. I mean, Chris Koch, an amazing philosopher of mind, recently made this shift towards what's called panpsychism, which is what I was saying earlier, that being conscious is always there as part of life. And so that's the movement of science, the philosophy of science, is accepting that consciousness is always there. Panpsychism means, in the Greek, all is mind, all has mind. Pan, everywhere, psyche, mind. So they're moving in that direction. So it's not about science explaining consciousness, it's about science accepting that being conscious is an absolutely fundamental part of reality. We have a question from a Zoom participant. Can someone read the question?
I wonder what role you think different languages play in the connection to consciousness, if any, and if maybe some more than others. It's a vast question, I know, but if you have time to touch on the topic, I'd be grateful.
It's not a subject I know a lot about, but there's quite a lot I've come across interesting papers which suggest that the language we speak modifies the experience we have. So what we experience is actually, to a degree, conditioned by our language, by both the structure of the language. You know, some languages have very different structures, and that affects, you know, how you think about things, but actually how you experience. I mean, one thing, and this I find fascinating, it's a tiny, tiny example of this. But if you show people a spectrum of colour, and you go from green to blue, and we show them greens, and then it becomes a greenish blue, and then it becomes a blue. And you ask people to identify, where does the green become blue? And German speakers will place it at a different point than English speakers. Now that in itself is interesting. They then looked at German speakers who learned to speak English fluently and lived in England, and they started saying the point was actually a bit further over. So that's just one tiny example where language clearly affects the way we see reality. No one was explaining how this could happen. It's a complete mystery. This is just one tiny thing, and there's the whole, what they call, Wolffian hypothesis in psychology. It was about 50 years ago, where he went into this a lot, how your reality, the way you experience reality is conditioned by language. What was that movie recently with the octopus aliens? Come on.
Alien. Arrival.
Arrival. That was the whole point of Arrival, was founded on that premise. And so, because their language wasn't linear sentences in time, it wasn't linear in time, but was the whole image was there, the whole sentence was there in one moment in time. Where they took that was that the octopus beings who spoke and speak, but who had language which was instant, in one instant, had a whole different relationship to time. And that, so time became this much more fluid time. So as what's her name became more familiar with their language, she found her own consciousness being able to be leaky in terms of time. Well, that's purely science fiction, but it's based on that idea that a language does condition how we actually experience reality. So, thanks for your question. We have one over here, and one at the back. Let's go to the back first. Let's get some attention.
Hear me okay?
Yep.
So I just recently returned from 155 days of spending time in subcontinent India. And I could make some comments to where you said we don't have some insights, because I gained some during that travel. So what I observed is like we're talking in our heads, right, through philosophy. But the people in India, they don't do that so much, or in Pakistan or wherever you go. They practice. They spend hours in the temples, they do pujas, they do rituals. And I think it leads more towards the direction of, they don't know anything about philosophy necessarily, but they practice it. And the spiritual atmosphere in these places is phenomenal. Like, you can feel that. So I think that's more the direction in which we go. So it's not so much an intellectual pursuit, but a practice, which we actually don't have in the Western world, except yoga. Yoga is a practice. So the people who do yoga and meditation, if you combine those two, that's actually going in the right direction. And then, and there's some, so I went to the temples, I went to over 100 temples in that time. Then at the end I went to ashrams. So in an ashram we have a living guru, and they distinguish between a living guru and a dead guru. Mm-hmm. Again, what does it have to do with? It's like the vibration, they say. And then again, there's some people just go there and they look around, mm-hmm. and then they leave. And there's some people who practice, and some people never leave. Right. So that's just the observation. So that's where we're going.
Yeah, thanks.
Make any sense?
Yeah, yes, it's a very important point. Thank you. Because, I mean, I've mentioned meditation. Because yoga, as you mentioned, meditation for me is, I think for many people, a fundamental practice, very fundamental. The sort of meditation I'm talking about, where it's ways to allow the mind to settle down and become quiet and get more in touch. That is, to me, a fundamental practice, which is part of my life. I would also say, some of the other things I mentioned, like the kindness. How can I relate to someone without being attacking? that sort of thing, or forgiveness, putting myself in their shoes. All of these, to me, are practices. They're all practices we can do in our lives. And you're absolutely right. Without practice, this is all empty philosophy. Maybe interesting, stimulating, gets the mind going, gets us excited, whatever. But for me, it's all pointing towards the need to practice. Only through practice that we will actually change, we will move on. So, yeah, I totally get that. Thank you. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Thanks. And there's a question here. Second row.
With your extensive background in theoretical physics and mathematics and computer sciences and psychology, my question is, how would you set up a scientific investigation of consciousness?
I would.
So,
For reasons. As I say, there's two aspects to consciousness. The easy problem, the hard problem. If it was the easy problem, that is understanding how seeing the green of a tree, what goes on in the brain that results in my having the experience of green, then I'd set that up in a laboratory, various experiments. I'd be studying what happens in the brain that gives rise to a particular experience. In terms of studying being conscious, you don't need to study it. There's nothing to study. It's something we know. What we all know, we are conscious. You know you are conscious.
not everybody, especially, it would seem, not scientists.
Now here's a judgment about consciousness.
Could be.
You're judging there. Are you saying that scientists are complete zombies?
No, I'm not.
Their experience. They're
I'm
just mechanical beings.
saying based on the papers, that they're publishing.
What you're saying is, based on the papers they're publishing, they don't see the world the same way you see the world. But they're still conscious beings seeing the world. You're not saying they're a robot with no inner awareness.
No, I'm just saying that they are questioning the privacy of consciousness as opposed to matter. So in their world,
yes. In their world.
matter is
In their
takes the
world,
first place.
matter, space, time is fundamental. When we understand matter, space, time in all its fine degrees, we will understand everything, including consciousness. So that's the paradigm that most scientists are working in.
That's what I meant. Sorry, I wasn't exactly clear.
Yes, but I wouldn't call them unconscious because of that.
I did not call them unconscious.
Sorry. I was just. I was playing with you, sorry. No, but to answer your question, in terms of what is conscious, why are we conscious? I don't think that's a subject for scientific exploration. That's where we go wrong. Is trying to account for consciousness. It can't be accounted for, but it can be recognized and known that we are all conscious beings. So, in terms of the easy problem, yes, I go into a laboratory and look at brains, dissect dead brains, whatever science does. That's that.
Can I just add one more question? I would actually like to go back to the very first question.
We haven't got much time left,
No.
so you might get a very brief answer.
It's going to be very brief.
Great.
So I remember Steiner saying 100 years ago that the interface between the man and machine is unavoidable. So he seemed to have predicted where we're going today 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, do you see any kind of alteration of the way we experience ourselves as we interface with machines?
I think, yes, but in many ways. But we start almost like becoming our machines in a strange way. I mean, okay, this is a machine which we all have, most of us, a car. My car is sort of, when I'm driving, is sort of an extension of my body. You know, I want to go faster, my body moves the car, I want to go this way. It's like it's a bit of apparatus connected to my body. So it's not like there's a car, I'm driving it. You know, somehow it's connected more intimately. And I think the same with computers. You know, we start having this relationship with our computers, a tool that becomes familiar. Like, people get angry with their computers. so what I'm saying is, yes, this is happening. And those are just a couple of ways. It's probably happening a lot more as well. Yeah. And just off the cuff. We have time for, okay, we're running out of time, but let's be quick.
Be quick.
I'll be quick.
Okay.
You can be
So
quick.
the basic concept in medicine and psychology
Yeah.
is the brain is where the emotions and mind are, correct? First question, two questions. Have you ever taken a picture of emotion or the mind or a thought? Have you ever taken a picture of those?
No. No. They're subjective experiences. They're things that happen. They're experiences that we are conscious of. They are experiences which populate our consciousness. We may find some physiological background to them, but no, they don't exist in the physical world. They exist in the subjective world of consciousness. So,
I just wanted to follow up on what you're saying about the automobile, being an extension of ourselves. So the question is how we're going to interact with machines. And that's what GPS is, essentially AI. And even if I know I'm only going to my grocery store, I still put it on. Because just in case there's an accident, I'm going to, find a better way to go. And it's not that far in the future where we're going to have some wearable, some personal assistant that will be a GPS for everything we do. We're going to consult it on, boy, they're going to dinner. You know, I always hire and make reservations and they're ordered for you. They will just go there. They'll actually, the driverless car pick us up. And I don't know where that ends, but I think that's certainly, that's not science fiction. We're looking at it.
yeah. I personally try not to use GPS. I don't use calculators. I want to keep my brain exercised, doing sums, doing arithmetic. Keep my brain exercised, not just do it. And also with GPS, I mean, I will use it in certain situations.
A new city.
A
new city.
A new city, perhaps. I have a very good visual spatial memory. I don't need to find my way around. It's a whole other thing. I've never found a real use for it except cab driving. I see towns laid out before me. This road must intersect with this road down there because it's a strange thing I have. I do, but coming down here, like I just drove down, 6 hours, 30, or 9 minutes. I set ways when I left off, purely because of this, because unexpected traffic jams. I wanted to be down here before the bookshop closed. And I set off in time, and it told me, when I left Sebastopol, it told me the minute I would arrive here at Kratona. And it took me round San Jose on a route I didn't know, which was brilliant, which I now know will do again and again. It took me through the traffic jams in 101 in Santa Barbara, and all that accounted for, and landed me up here 1 minute different from this prediction.
Well, in LA, we can't live without it.
Yes, I do, but I prefer finding a way around. I prefer just to use my own memory, keep my mind exercised. So, you want to ask another question at the back? We're sort of running out of time.
I can just add to it. That's going in the direction of, are you familiar with the...
Can you wait for the microphone?
Are you familiar with the expression flow state?
Hang on, microphone.
My voice is pretty good. Are you familiar with the expression flow state?
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced it?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of what it is, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, a couple of things to finish. There's my books outside, obviously. And I'll be signing books by the bookstore. Someone mentioned my own AI. I have my own chatbot called Peterbot. I've uploaded with all my work. It's got all my books, it's got all the essays I've written, the transcripts of all the talks I've given, the videos I made. I've uploaded my basic life, my knowledge into this chatbot. And so people can go, when I have questions now, you can go online. And I am amazed at the answers it's giving. I'm blown away. I'm serious. Because if you ask me a question, like we have been doing, and I'll come back with the response comes to me at the moment, about consciousness and mechanism, whatever. You ask my Peterbot a question, and it's drawing on everything I've ever thought or written. And it'll come up with what I would have said, and it then says, and another way of looking at this, and I'm thinking, God, that's so good, I've never thought of that. And it says, also, and bear in mind this. I was like, God, it's answering the questions. Occasionally it's a bit off. For about 1 in 20 times it's a bit off. That's okay, it hallucinates a little bit. I am blown away by how it's giving better answers than I could give. So anybody who asks me an email question, I just send it to my bot. You'll get much better service from my bot. In fact, I should have stood there just punching the questions and read out the answers. I should do that sometime.
Yes.
Did he ever try to negotiate his contract with you?
No. I do pay Chat-GPT.
Peter, wouldn't it be fun to have him with you up here on the screen so he can decide who you ask?
Yeah. Next time I'll bring him along.
I asked you a question,
And was it useful?
this way, I was curious if you were familiar with things I studied the boards or.
Great, yeah. Anyway, so, ask me questions online, it's great fun.
It is.
Yeah. And also, it means, when I depart this plane, you can still ask me questions. Anyway, thank you all for having me.